Good evening. It's Mayor Weinstein with Never Again Live Show. It's great to have people join us. I'm going to ask everyone who joins us tonight if you could please share this with the various groups and pages that you're part of on Facebook, on different social media platforms. We'll reach a lot more people, have a stronger impact. There's a lot going on right now. So just give it a moment for people to join us and to share it. And then we'll get into the issues. Also, remember that it's a call-in, so we'll take your calls. We'll hopefully provide the right answers that you're looking for. And the number to call is 647-510-5535. We'll put that up on the screen during the show. And we'd love to hear from you and love to exchange ideas. That's what it's all about. So like I said, there's so much going on. And we just finished celebrating Shavuot, the Jewish holiday of Shavuot. And what is Shavuot? Shavuot commemorates the giving of the Torah from God to the Jewish people. It's actually when the marriage was taking place between the Jewish people and God. And the contract was the Torah. And it says that the Jewish people, they saw the sounds. They saw the sounds of the giving of the Torah. Now, how do you understand that? They saw the sounds. What's going on? You know, when we talk about this, what occurred with the Jewish people when they were in Egypt, in bondage, and when they left, and the various episodes that occurred, we intellectualize it. We discuss it, and we try to relate to it how we would respond. But because we were not there, we don't really comprehend what's going on amongst themselves, the challenges they face, the fears that they had, living under Egyptian cruel rule, where there's a story of before the Exodus happened, before Moses met God. There's a story that one of the angels appeared before the throne of God, and he brought the soul of a baby that was embedded in the pyramids, murdered. That's how it was from the Egyptians, that the show had to go on, disregard for Jewish life, and even babies, to get that pyramid built or whatever structure built. If they're going to crush a Jewish baby in the process, it didn't matter. So the Jewish people back then, they internalized what was going on. So maybe we could understand a little bit more what it means that the Jewish people, their eyes heard what took place at Mount Sinai with the revelation of the Torah. There's something called the mind's eye. The mind's eye perceives things a lot different, and the mind's eye hears, and the mind's ear sees. They experience that level of anti-Semitism. They don't need someone intellectualizing and giving excuses for the behavior of the Egyptians. And when the Jewish people left Egypt, they were pursued by the Amalekites. First, before that, the Egyptians pursued them. The sea parted. God drowned the Egyptian army. But after that, the Amalekites attacked the Jewish people for no other reason than to try to annihilate the Jewish people. Pure, vicious anti-Semitism. And when the Jewish people eventually made it to Mount Sinai, they saw everything with their mind's eye. Why do I say that? Because today, vicious anti-Semitism is going on. The most cruel form of anti-Semitism in every single city I could think of, from Toronto to Montreal to Los Angeles to parts of Florida, Boca Raton, Miami, Europe, in England, so-called Free Palestine rallies that are manifestations of the worst type of anti-Semitism I have experienced. And the CBC in Toronto, they say that when Jews show up to counter-protest, to wave the Israeli flag, that we are the racists. We see it for what it is with our mind's eye, and we call it out. We have the evidence. We understand what's going on. There could have been lynchings downtown Toronto over Shabbat for those Jews who confronted and stood tall and proud waving Israeli flags. We'll share the information. There's going to be a lot more information coming out. And we'll share some of it. We'll share some information about other cities that have gone on. There are, in the northern part of Toronto, in Thornhill, there have been attacks on some Jewish homes. Some Jewish businesses were recently attacked. Phone calls to Jewish businesses. Is this company owned by Israelis? Jewish girls in cars being attacked because they support Israel. If you have an Israeli flag on your vehicle, you're subject to attacks. There's been a lot of attacks recently. So we understand what's going on because we have the memory of what happened to our parents and our grandparents in Europe during the Holocaust. No one is going to lecture us about anti-Semitism. Certainly not the CBC. Not the CBC. And just over this weekend, in Gaza, Israel sent a warning to a building in Gaza that was the address for major news networks, but also the address for Hamas to plot and plan how to kill Jews in Israel and to fire rockets into Israel. And the media tried to pretend they didn't know. They did know. And again, we perceive this. We perceive this with our mind's eye. No one's going to BS us about this. Look what's going on. Protests, mass protests going on during this apparent pandemic, where everybody else is told you have to stay home. You have to stay home. Don't go out. Shut down your business. Don't gather. It's the NHL playoffs right now. And in Toronto, this is probably, I think, one of the most fanatic, in a good sense, cities for NHL hockey. The Leafs have a great team this year. Who knows? Maybe they'll make it to the finals and win the cup. And if they do win the cup, will there be a Stanley Cup parade in Toronto? Well, no, you can't. But if you want to gather and bash Israel and call for the destruction of Israel and kill Jews, you could have such rallies, such gatherings. There's an area outside of the Scotiabank Arena where the Maple Leafs play in Toronto, and they call it Maple Leaf Square, where during regular times, normal times, they have huge screens and thousands of people gather there and watch outside the game because they don't go in. They didn't have the money to go in and watch the game. You can't gather there. But again, you could gather at City Hall in downtown Toronto. You could gather in City Hall in Mississauga. You gather anywhere you want in Canada and other places and talk about and praise Hamas and talk about killing Jews. Now, there's something wrong there. And our politicians are ignoring this. But you want to watch a hockey game? Or you want to have friends over for a barbecue? Something? You could be arrested and face serious penalties. So what's going on? What's going on? It's horrible what's going on. We have a little clip that I want to share with everyone. We have a guest on as well from New York. He's a columnist. We'll introduce him soon, Moish Hill, good guy. And we'll get with him soon and we'll talk about the issues going on. And also people can call in. But we have a short clip from Rabbi Meir from I don't know, maybe 30 years ago or so, who talked about the issues. Like the current issue that's going on right now wasn't new to him then. It was a serious problem that he said is going to erupt. And this had to deal with not only supporters of Hamas outside of Israel, but within Israel. Watch this clip. You'd be amazed. And it's something we could discuss, because what's going on today with synagogues in Israel being ransacked, unfortunately, by Israeli Arabs, and Jews being attacked and sometimes killed and lynched in Israel by Israeli Arabs, something that wasn't expected. You know, people were telling us that there was very good coexistence going on, and we could show that they're given all kinds of freedoms, and they are. And they are. But reality is reality. A lot of people couldn't believe what's going on. So we do have this clip. We'll show it, and it's just very interesting.
Clip's coming up, okay?
Okay. Well, that's great.
And
throughout the world, Jews will read from the portion of the Torah, the Jewish law, and they will read the following: "And I will establish my covenant between me and thee, and thy seed after thee, in their generations, for an everlasting covenant to be God unto thee, and to thy seed after thee. And I will give unto thee, and to thy seed after thee, the land wherein thou art a stranger, all the land of Canaan, for an everlasting possession." That was the beginning of Zionism. That, and not Theodor Herzl. And it was not in Basel, Switzerland in 1897 that a Jewish state was founded, but it was on a night 4,000 years ago, in the land of Canaan, that the Almighty God pledged that the Jewish people would be a special people, a chosen people, and that the land would be theirs. Ever since then, there have been nations that have attempted to dispute that claim. And what we are seeing now in Israel, the attempt by Arabs to claim that that land is theirs and that it is called Palestine, is nothing more than the latest phase in an effort on the part of many, many nations to dispute not only the Jewish claim, but the divine claim. I think it is imperative that we grasp this, because this is the essential nub of the problem. We are not dealing with the problem of the 1967 boundaries. That is not the problem. Because before the 1967 war broke out, and when the Arabs had all of the land that they now claim must be given back to them or else there will be no peace, there was still no peace. And when the so-called moderate King Hussein of Jordan, who daily trumpets the fact that there will never be peace unless Israel gives up East Jerusalem, when King Hussein had East Jerusalem in 1967 and went to war, the question arises, why? It is eminently easy to give easy answers. If we give up land, there will be peace. If we don't give up land, there will be peace. Demagogues say that, because the truth is that there will not be peace no matter what Israel does. And we're not speaking here of peace. We're speaking here of Jewish survival. A survival which is threatened by the Arabs who massacred Jews in the 1920s, before there was a Jewish state. What in the world possessed the Arabs in Hebron in 1929 to massacre 67 Jews in one day? Who incited them then? Kahana, who wasn't even born? Begin, who was a tiny child in Poland. No one incited the Arabs in 1929. What incited the Arabs in 1929 was an idea, Zionism. That is what they opposed, not Meir Kahana, not Zionist hawks or Zionist doves. What bothers the Arabs is Zionism, a Jewish state of any size, of any shape, and of any form. Peace? You want peace? I have an instant peace plan. Give up Israel, and you'll have peace. And Auschwitz again and again and again. Zionism did not come into being for peace. It came into being for a Jewish state, and hopefully with peace. But peace or no peace, a Jewish state. And on that, there is no compromise. Arafat is not interested in Hebron. To him, there is no difference between a Hebron in Judea or a Jaffa. He believes that both are Arab cities. He believes that there is no difference between a Haifa or a Nablus, Shechem. And he's right. Of course he's right. There is no essential difference. They're both ours. If we have no right to a Shechem, there is no Nablus. And people say, but that's the Arab name. That's not the Arab name. The Romans conquered Shechem and called it Napulus, Naples. The Arabs have difficulty pronouncing a P, so Napulus became Nablus. And if anything, we should give it back to the Italians. There's no Nablus, there is Shechem. Ask any Baptist. He reads the Bible. He never heard of Nablus. He knows Shechem and Hebron and Jericho, Jericho. If these are not Jewish cities, then indeed we have no right to a Tel Aviv that was built in 1905. Our claim, when we returned in the 1880s and 1890s, our right to come back was based not upon a Tel Aviv that had not yet been built. It was based upon the fact that our father Abraham, 4,000 years ago, lived in Hebron, and our father Jacob in Shechem. That is our claim, and on that, there's no compromise. What we have here is a struggle between two peoples who both believe that the land belongs to them. The tragedy is Jewish liberals and the Jewish left who have such contempt for the Arabs, enormous contempt. We should raise their living standards and then they'll be good Arabs. If we give them education, then they'll be good Arabs. If we give them electricity and indoor toilets, then they'll be good Arabs. What contempt for the Arabs? What contempt for human beings? You can't buy the Arabs' national pride with an indoor toilet. The Arabs believe the country's theirs. They're not ready to say, well, it's really ours, but give us an indoor toilet and we'll be satisfied. Only a Jew who has national pride can understand Arab national pride. Now, of course, it's not their country. Of course, it is not, but they believe it is. So stop playing games with them. Living standards. The problem is not living standards. The problem is not education. The fact of the matter is, he is here, and I live in Jerusalem. It's quite all right. It's quite all right. We'll continue this. I'm fine. Let's continue.
Are you certain that that isn't caustic, or might not be? Might flush it off the water?
God is good. That's quite all right. Quite all right. Let's continue. This Arab is in Washington, and this Jew lives in Jerusalem. Quite all right. That's all right. Let's continue. I think that it's clear that when we speak of education, clearly the most dangerous of all Arabs are the educated ones. Clearly the Arab who is now studying at Hebrew University will be the intellectual. He will be the leader. He will be the PLO leader tomorrow. And so, there will be no compromise. The solution, not to peace, but to the survival of Israel, will be the expulsion of the Arabs from Israel, and may they all live here and attempt to do in Washington what they do to me here now, but they will certainly not have a Palestine. And indeed, the desperation here is really the ultimate.
Well, there you have it. I mean, there's a problem going on right now that lots of Arabs, many Arabs in Israel are, they're saying that the land should be called Palestine, and they're lynching Jews and destroying synagogues. And I'm reading articles by Israeli Jews who were well known on the left, and it's a major eye-opener for them. So not saying that I'm happy to see any of this, but it's like, where does it come from? That's going on, that Jews are being attacked and synagogues are being destroyed and firebombed, and car rammings are happening by Israeli Arabs into Israeli police and others. It's almost like the beginnings of another intifada that's going on. So it's something that we should be discussing. And, you know, Rabbi Kahana, what he was talking about is not so far off at all. You know, people could relate to it now. We do have a clip about some of the riots going on in Israel right now. We'll show that, and then we'll talk about what's going on in diaspora, attacks on Jews, and that there should be safety patrols in Jewish communities to make sure that people cannot have their way with Jews. Here's a clip.
We're here outside Sushi Fumi in West Hollywood. A group of Palestinians, about 30 of them, jumped out of a car and asked who was Jewish. Two guys said they were, and they proceeded to beat them up. A couple people stepped in. Even a Christian Arab jumped out to help. Guy in the gray shirt right here. They're apparently going around the city and asking who's Jewish and beating him up. This is America, guys. Things are not looking good.
Palestine! عندك وافتح ابواب جهنم يا بن حيوان. You attack Al-Aqsa, we'll do World War III so we can liberate it from you. If you want peace, leave Al-Aqsa alone. Leave Al-Aqsa alone. Leave Gaza alone. Leave the West Bank alone. Leave the Palestinians alone. Leave the Middle East alone. Because if you don't leave it alone, you can get the Jahannam, and Palestine will be liberated, just like Salah ad-Din liberated from the Crusaders.
Yeah, there's a lot more videos available as well, but I think we made our point. Together with these protests by the BDS and various Islamic organizations, they're calling for free Palestine, at the same time glorifying Hamas and inciting crowds to get weapons and Kalashnikovs and machine guns. I've seen advertisements as well by some of these organizations promoting their rallies, and the so-called most respectable peoples in their communities are sharing the links. And like one organization, Samodun, who the government of Israel has listed as a front, a terrorist front for the PFLP, there's a picture that they're promoting for the so-called what they call the Palestinian struggle for this week, showing two men wearing keffiyehs wrapped around their heads, just their eyes showing, with machine guns. This is not a poster of peace or anything like that, and that's what we're seeing at these quotes Palestine rallies. We're seeing a lot of hate, a lot of anti-Semitism. Again, we're going to be, we can't detail everything on this show, but there's going to be a lot more information coming out that we want to share with people. And our allies will also be sharing this information as well. It's going all over Canada. It's going throughout the United States and in Europe, other parts of the world, in London, England. Obviously, they're seeing it vividly in Israel as well. And they're not sure where it came from out of the blue, but it is happening. So we have a guest with us, Moir. He's a columnist, and let's bring him on and we can talk about his experiences writing about anti-Semitism, what he's involved with, and he's in New York right now. Moir, how are you doing?
Been better, but thank you for having me on.
Very good. Very good. So you've been monitoring a lot of what's going on with these protests or riots and incitement, and you also see so-called Jewish organizations that are partnering up with them, like If Not Now and J Street. And what could you tell us about this?
Thank you. Well, I find it interesting that you started this show with talking about Shavuos, and it also counts the end of the Omer. And at the beginning of the Omer,
Right.
during the Pesach Seder, we said that during the Magid, that every single generation, an enemy will come up and rise up against people. And this is this generation's fight.
Hang on one quick sec, Moir.
Hey, how's it going?
Very good.
I just have a question for you, if you don't mind.
You got a question? We have answers.
Okay. So, hey, listen. First of all, free Palestine. Second
Thanks
of all,
a lot. Yeah.
That was quick.
Yeah. He lost his voice.
Yeah. So we said that every single generation, an enemy will come up and try to destroy the Jewish people. And
Yep.
in many of these generations, there were Jews that participated with the enemies to help destroy the Jewish people. And there were the Hellenists, there were the Kapos, there were Jews in Russia that did this. And there are going to be more Jews. Now, the Jews that are doing it today are Jews go by the name of If Not Now. They go by the name of Jewish Voice for Peace. They go by the name of J Street. These are the allies of our enemies who hate Judaism, who hate our connection with the state of Israel, with the land of Judea, and
Yep.
they hate our religion as well. So what I refer to them as, they are not self-hating Jews. They are Judaism-hating Jews. They hate
Right.
Judaism. They love themselves. They love their Jewish ethnic identity, but they hate Judaism.
Right. 100%. 100%. Same thing. Don't worry
I
about
didn't
it.
comment on the progressive Israel groups just since our guest tonight had missed it, but we put together a little list a few weeks ago for the progressive Israel groups. And notice the progressive Israel groups, we call them the PIGs, the progressive Israel groups. And this is a listing of them. Obviously the pneumatic for them is pigs. Okay, back to you.
It is amazing.
And what I wrote about this week, so I have a weekly column, The Queen's Jewish Link, and what I
Right.
wrote about last week, actually, because it comes out every Wednesday, was how groups like If Not Now and Jewish Voice for Peace are far more dangerous to American Jews than groups like the Neturei Karta. The Neturei Karta, they're dressed as Hasidim, they're used as political props for our enemies, but there's no unaffiliated American Jew who looks at that group and says, oh, they're speaking to me and I want to join them. But the groups of If Not Now and Jewish Voice for Peace, they're on college campuses. They speak the vocabulary. They talk like activists, like social justice warriors, and they say, "Hey, you know how you hate America because America stole the land from the Indians? Well, you should hate Israel because these Zionists stole the land from the Palestinians. And these Zionists, they're not like you and me. They're not Jewish like you and me." And they don't conform to what we do. We're very progressive. We believe in a different kind of Judaism. Sure, that Judaism doesn't keep Shabbos or kosher or anything like that. Any of the 613 mitzvos that you and I have when we practice Judaism, but or many religious Jews, but they eat their bagels and they say that they're ethnically Jewish because otherwise they're just a bunch of white people with problems. So that's what they like to do. They like to lure in college-age kids and teach them a very slanted view of history. Are we going to say that there weren't mistakes along the way? Absolutely not. Obviously, every single history has made mistakes over now and then, but we can talk about those from a three-dimensional perspective. We cannot do that with people who only show the one-dimensional view that Israel is the aggressor in this conflict.
No, 100%. No, it's the same guy calling. We don't need him. No. What about J Street?
So J Street is a far more nefarious organization in terms of their political acumen. So they have large conferences. They bring in presidential candidates. They are considered a mainstream organization. However, what they don't do is they don't push for actual peace, because you cannot push for actual peace without pointing out the problems of the Palestinian people. If you want to make a list of the problems of the Palestinian people, Israel won't even crack the top 10. It doesn't do it. And if you really cared about the Palestinian people, you would talk about Hamas, you would talk about Fatah, you would talk about Mahmoud Abbas in his 15th year of his 4-year term or 16th year of his 4-year term. You would talk about the fact that they're taking billions and billions of dollars in foreign aid and putting it into terrorist activities. You would talk about the fact that there's no jobs, that there's no I think it's around 50% of Gaza is unemployed. And I think it's around over 30% of Judea and Samaria is unemployed. And the ones that are employed, they're getting their jobs in Israel. They're coming in to Israel, a lot of them. So it is absolutely ridiculous that when you put on a list of reasons why the Palestinians are dying, are really destroying themselves, Israel should not be number one, but J Street makes them number one with a bullet.
Right. 100%. Yeah, this guy, obviously this anti-Israel guy who wants to say again.
Well, if he was actually listening to what was going on, he wouldn't say what.
If the guy really had a question, that would be legit. But obviously, if you're a supporter of building tunnels and sending bombs and rockets into Israel and just pure anti-Semitism,
That's another part of it. They don't want a two-state solution. They talk, they wax poetic about a two-state solution. They don't want a two-state solution. They want a one-state solution. They want a solution
without Jews.
state called Palestine, and every single territory that is under the flag of the Palestinian Authority or Hamas is an actual apartheid location that does not allow Jewish people to live there. And if a Jew walks in there, they will be killed.
It's pretty amazing when you look at a map of the Middle East that tiny little Israel surrounded by these huge Arab countries, Islamic countries with vast resources as well. And that one little tiny Jewish state, they have an issue with. They don't want to exist. They're persistent, but it's amazing that Israel is so successful as well in every kind of field you could imagine, medical, scientific. We're into the oil and gas now and technology. And who would even believe that after the Holocaust that we would be like a superpower in terms of weapons, also defense weapons? That, it's true. So, they hate Israel, they hate us. But Israel's successful, and this is a period of time that's special. It's unbelievable, this period of time that we're living in. So you're seeing anti-Semitic attacks also going on at these pro-Palestine rallies. What could you tell us of what's going on in New York City with these protests going on and other areas that you're aware of? Well,
in New York City, there have been, over the course of the past 3 or 4 years, a series of anti-Semitic attacks. Not associated specifically with Arab, but it is not a far stretch to see anti-Semitism in New York City over the past 3, 4, 5 years. Just like there's anti-Asian American crimes perpetrated today, people don't really remember that 2 or 3 years ago, the same thing was happening to Hasidim randomly on the streets of Brooklyn, were happening in Jersey City, where there was a killing, there was happening in Muncie. So unfortunately, it is not.
Here's actually another call that might be legit.
Okay, let's see.
Can I help you? Hello?
Hello?
Yes.
Hello?
We can hear you.
This is Eugenia. I'm from Montreal, Canada. Not everybody in Canada supports the terrorists and don't believe in them. And we support Israel and support the Jewish people because it's wrong what's going on.
Right.
They're terrorists. They're killing people. What do they care? They don't see that the land belongs to Israel, that the Jewish people belong in that land. They can go to the Arab countries. They're actually Arabs. They're not really Palestinians. They're Arabs who mask themselves, and we're basically, they've been brainwashed to believe something else.
So you're from Montreal?
That's right.
Okay, so right. So what could you tell us about the anti-Semitic violence that we've been seeing happening in Montreal the past few days, in fact?
Well, it's been happening more than the past few days. We've had incidents where the synagogues, one synagogue, somebody went and really defiled it, and they really wrecked it. This has been happening for a long time right now. It's not something new. We are dealing with it. We're trying to do what we can.
Right. But it's been a little bit more, it's been more intense lately.
Yeah, I'm not arguing with you. You're right. The anti-Semitism has gotten worse.
Yep.
I won't argue with that. People tend to stay out of public places as much as before. But they've been doing that because of also this whole COVID thing. Although the whole thing is there has been incidents, but that's not it's not been new, and there's been, like you said, an increase.
Right.
And we're dealing with it like everybody else is. We're doing the best we can here.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. So is there a feeling amongst the Jewish community in Montreal of tense, feeling tense, more tense than previously?
I can't. I think you might be right on that, but there is a lookout, and you do get notification from the base that we have to be careful, that the police presence has been put upward here regarding it. I don't know if you're aware of that, but okay. You're located where?
We're in Toronto.
Okay. So you're just the problem's over.
But we've been, well, not really, but I mean, it's ongoing. And we've been to Montreal a number of times also. We've certainly seen what the problems are in Montreal, as well as other cities in Canada and in the United States. We've been there. We've seen it firsthand. Yeah.
Yeah, well, the thing is, like you said, there is because of recent threats recently to the city I live in, actually,
Right.
which is part of Montreal, but there's little suburbs. I don't know if you're aware. There's like different areas in Montreal.
Right.
And we had, so that's why I said the police presence. The police have been informed, and the police presence has been supposedly beefed up.
Yep.
So I mean,
what is the what's the situation in Montreal in terms of with the pandemic and lockdowns right now? Is that going on right now in Montreal and Quebec? Lockdowns?
Well, they have at one point they had us down to a curfew to about 8:30, 9:30. But I heard they might be letting up some of this starting in the summer more. That's what I heard on what I've seen.
But right now they have curfews and lockdowns and everything, but you could have an anti-Semitic protest in downtown Montreal. It's unbelievable.
They've had also protests against COVID. They've had protests and other things. So no, I was wondering why they haven't made a rally here, because I know they've made one in Ontario.
Right.
Am I right? Or the pro-Israeli rally. I haven't heard anything here.
Right.
But I would like to. I would have gone to one if they had one.
Sure.
But of course, I won't go on a Shabbat. But that's just me.
Right. Right.
But as you said, the whole Montreal area, like I said, and I had no idea they even had a Palestinian rally at all, because I didn't go down. I don't live downtown. I live more in one of the. It's on Montreal, but I'm not living downtown. Where they have the rallies, they're usually like St. Catherine's or one of the.
I know that area.
One of the streets.
Yes.
In that area, more central.
Yep.
Like what they call where the big skyscrapers are.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying where I am there's no skyscrapers, but not the same. It's not. It's a little more of a community more to the side.
Right. Well, listen. Thank you very much for calling us and sharing your information and your experiences. Thank you very much.
Well, I appreciate the fact that you're standing up and saying that this is wrong, that what's happening is wrong, and that you're doing what needs to be done. I mean, never again is something everybody wants to hear, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So my parents came out of the Second World War and the Holocaust, so I know about it.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So it's not something. The Holocaust was a horrible thing, and nobody wants to see anything like that happen again.
Yeah. Well, we have to stand strong.
What's happening now is not good.
Right. Right.
It's horrible. So I appreciate you giving me the time and talking with me, and have a wonderful day.
You too. Thank you very much. Okay, that's a good call. So we like to hear from people from our community and just what's going on. So she was from Montreal, and there's a lot of. Let's see. Someone has a question here for Moish. They're writing it. I wonder if Moish Hill thinks it is very important to teach about the massive recent illegal immigration of Arabs into Jewish land, and they are not indigenous. Well, I don't know, but we're not. Here's the thing: we're just when we live in diaspora, we're not going to lecture Israel what to do in terms of policy. I got ideas, I got feelings. I'm sure Moish has feelings about this. We all have feelings about what we would maybe like to see happen. But from here, outside of Israel, we just have to support Israel. And whatever government is elected, we hope for the best.
There is a big difference between Israel's domestic policy and Israel's foreign policy.
Right.
And I find that American Jews, Canadian Jews, they really don't focus a lot on the Israel domestic policy. I mean, because I am an American. I love America. I live in America. I've lived in America my whole life. I advocate for Israel on behalf of an American of America to Congress when I go on an annual trip to NORPAC. But I speak as an American. And honestly, as an American, it's really not my place to comment on domestic policy issues. Sure, I have opinions. Of course, I have opinions. But it's that's not really where I like to spend my effort when it comes to talking about Israel. I talk about the foreign policy of Israel because I find that when rockets are flying from Gaza and from Lebanon, and when people are coming in from Judea and Samaria to attack my family, my brothers and sisters, my Jewish brothers and sisters, but my actual family as well, my cousins, my aunts, my uncles, I have a lot of family over there. That affects me far more than how many sections there are at the Kotel for men and women praying.
You know, it's really unbelievable that, you know, from the Temple Mount, there were rocks being thrown at Jews at the Kotel. You know, when Israel came into being in 1948, and Jordan was able to take, in that war, the eastern part of Jerusalem and Judea and Samaria, what they call the West Bank, they made the Kotel area into a garbage dump. And they didn't allow Jews to go there and pray. And they would fire randomly into the Jewish area of Jerusalem. There was no peace with them. You know, no bleeding heart liberal peaceniks existed on the Jordanian side up until the 67 war, when Israel won and allowed Jews to roam anywhere in Jerusalem and go to the Kotel and clean it. We had to clean it. We had to, and there were synagogues decimated and destroyed, and gravestones made into walkways to washrooms, and worse, what they did, what they thought about us. And you know, when we see that going on, and everybody has social media, you're seeing on the Temple Mount on Har HaBayit that they're throwing rocks down on Jews who are at the Kotel. It's infuriating. So, you know, when we hope for the best that there's an Israeli government that stands up for, you know, strong Jewish values and protects the right of Jews to safety and security and holiness in Israel. And it seems that Netanyahu, I mean, he had the blessing of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and it seems that he really takes it to heart, his commitment to the land of Israel. So we wish for the best. So let's see, I'm alerted by our doctor in the studio about a little clip of Netanyahu. Let's watch that. Let's talk about it.
It's only 6 or 7 minutes, so anytime you want to put it out, bring it on.
Okay.
Let's do it. Let's show it.
All right, I'll tell them my point after.
Yeah.
There are only two ways that you can deal with them. You can either conquer them, and that's always an open possibility, or you can deter them. And we are engaged right now in forceful deterrence, but I have to say, we don't rule out anything. We hope we can restore quiet. We hope we can restore it quickly. We didn't see this conflict. In fact, we could see the origins of this particular outbreak in the cancellation of the Palestinian elections. Hamas was sure that it would gain considerable power, and when they saw that these elections were not going to take place, they sought to use the Jerusalem Day ceremonies and events around Jerusalem Day and the court proceedings in Sheikh Jarrah to incite riots, to incite violence in order to further their political goals.
אני פה בבסיס חיל האוויר בחצירים, קודם לכן במטה פיקוד דרום בבאר שבע. קיבלתי סקירות על התקיפות הרבות שלנו נגד החמאס והג'יהאד האסלאמי. הם קיבלו מכות שהם לא ציפו להם, ואין לי ספק שהחזרנו אותם שנים רבות אחורה. אני מקיים מערכות מצב, מקבלים החלטות. אנחנו נמשיך ככל שידרש כדי להשיב את השקט לכל אזרחי ישראל. ודבר נוסף, אני בטוח כל האויבים שלנו מסביב רואים איזה מחיר אנחנו גובים על התוקפנות נגדנו, ואני בטוח שגם הם יפיקו את הלקח.
would continue. We're also hearing a big barrage of rockets is happening as we speak right now. Talk to us your assessment of Israel's ability to handle both what's happening in the north and the south as we speak.
I don't believe there's any question that Israel has the ability to deal with both at the same time, and also, if necessary, if anybody is able to launch missiles from Syria into Israel, they would be able to deal with that as well. I don't think there's any doubt about their capability of doing so. I do think one thing that's very important is that Israel be allowed, and not pressured otherwise, but be allowed to deal with this threat, particularly the threat from Gaza at the moment. And what that means is Israel needs to do as much damage as it decides it has to the Hamas infrastructure to prevent further rounds of fighting. And only Israel can judge that. The US can't judge it. The EU can't judge it. No one else can judge it. Only Israel can. And Israel should be given the freedom to defend itself, not just from this current battery of attacks, but also from future attacks.
I also want to use this opportunity to ask the ambassadors of Thailand and India to send my personal condolences to the families of their citizens who were killed, murdered by Hamas rockets. 2 agricultural workers from Thailand, 1 Indian caregiver. And I think this is just one more manifestation of the fact that Hamas indiscriminately targets everyone. They've actually killed 2 Israeli Arabs in Lod, targeted Tira, an Arab town. They're truly an equal opportunity.
Tony Blinken said that Israel has an extra burden, that Israel, because of its strength and power and dominance, has an extra burden on these question of casualties. The question is whether Israel is meeting its extra burden in responding to these rocket attacks from Hamas.
You certainly are. And I can tell you that there have been many studies by serious military analysts who have compared Israel's actions with that of other Western armies in similar situations fighting radical Islamists, whether it's in Iraq or in Afghanistan or elsewhere. And you know how prolonged those conflicts are, how many casualties are caused. So I think there is there has to be a measure of fairness. There has to be a measure of reasonableness in projecting this kind of criticism against the Israeli army that is second to none in seeking to minimize civilian casualties while protecting our own civilians. You know, if Hamas would simply move these rockets out of the civilian areas, if they move their command posts out of these homes and offices, then there wouldn't be any problem.
Let me ask you, Mr. Prime Minister.
But the fact is, they're sending thousands of rockets on our cities with a specific purpose of murdering our civilians from these places.
Let me ask you, Mr.
What would you do?
Let me ask
if it
you,
happened to Washington and to New York? You know damn well what you do.
Let me ask you,
you do at the very least what we're doing.
The precision of that targeting has been up for question. There's been a lot of focus on the bombing on Saturday in Gaza of a building that housed the Associated Press and Al Jazeera. The Committee to Protect Journalists demanded detailed and documented justification. This morning, there's a Jerusalem Post story that says the Americans were shown a smoking gun, that proof that Hamas was in that building. What is that proof? And did you show it to the Americans?
Well, we share with our American friends all that intelligence. And here's the intelligence we had. It's about Palestinian terrorist, an intelligence office for the Palestinian terrorist organization housed in that building that plots and organizes the terror attacks against Israeli civilians. So it's a perfectly legitimate target. And I can tell you that we took every precaution to make sure that there were no civilian injuries. In fact, no deaths, no injuries whatsoever. Well, I can't say injuries. I don't know if somebody received a fragment of a stone. I don't know that. But no people were killed. Now imagine, ask yourself, how is that possible? You see these high-rise towers that are used by Hamas over and over again. They collapse and no one is killed. Why does that happen? Because we, unlike Hamas, take special precautions to tell people, leave the building. leave the premises. We make sure that everyone is gone before we bring down those terrorist facilities. And that's the difference between Israel and Hamas. They deliberately target our cities, deliberately target our civilians. They glorify the death of children and civilians and old people. They are happy with it. I think they're happy with any deaths that are caused to them. We grieve for every non-combatant loss in Gaza, and we grieve for all our civilians who die in Israel. We're not happy with it, and we try to minimize it.
Excellent. Moish, what could you tell us about Anthony Blinken?
Well, our esteemed Secretary of State over here in the United States actually violated the State Department's own definition of anti-Semitism by saying that Israel has an extra burden. And I want to pull this up to make sure I'm accurate. In the state.gov State Department website, in the defining anti-Semitism section, one of the ways that you can be anti-Semitic is by, and I'm quoting, applying double standards by requiring of it a behavior not expected or demanded of any other democratic nation. So, end quote. So Tony Blinken, by saying that the Jewish state has an extra burden that is not applied, not demanded by any other democratic nation, is actually violating the State Department's own definition of anti-Semitism. So the Jewish nation does not have an extra burden. They take that extra burden because we value life. But the idea that we are unduly burdened to, now, I'm sorry, I shouldn't say we, I should say Israel, that Israel is unduly burdened more so than any other democratic nation. No nation would stand for this. Imagine if rockets were flying from Tijuana into San Diego indiscriminately, attacking American citizens. Would any president worth his salt would level that city? It would be gone in a second, without worrying about any civilian casualties. Israel.
And would they allow any underground tunnels to be dug into other cities and all of that?
Exactly. Imagine if San Jose, New Mexico, which is on the border of the Mexican side of the government, was attacked by cartels. That could, by the way, that could easily be a reality in the coming future. So it is absolutely ridiculous to say that a democratic nation is to be treated differently on the world stage than any other democratic nation. And by the State Department's own definitions, that is anti-Semitism. And I wouldn't be surprised if the State Department, they changed their definitions in 2018 during the Trump administration to include some language to combat what the Squad was saying, what Ilhan Omar was saying, what Rashida Tlaib was saying. The Trump State Department changed the language. And frankly, I'm surprised that the Biden State Department didn't change it back yet. But I wouldn't be surprised if they did in the near future.
Right, because the Trump administration adopted the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism, and you have J Street that is lobbying the Biden administration not to adopt it, to reject it, and Tony Blinken is very close with J Street, and he's married in a church. That says a lot when you compare him to the previous administration, who Donald Trump appointed as ambassador, as all kinds of high positions. They were like proud Jews that Donald Trump appointed, and religious Jews. And here you have a case of he's going to tell Israel what is Jewish and what is moral in a Jewish context. He doesn't know, and he doesn't keep, and he's rejected. And he is very close with, he serves in a think tank for a number of years already with the CEO of J Street as well. And they are dedicated to, there's a lot of anti-Israel policies in this organization. Don't have that organization at the tip of my tongue right now, but we did have a show a couple of months ago, and we talked about that, his connections and his history and that. So, I mean, it's just Unbelievable that on the issue of anti-Semitism, as you correctly pointed out, that the definition he doesn't even articulate.
Yes, it is. It is an incredible thing, and it's not like J Street is alone when it comes to trying to influence American politicians. In 2019, during the heat of the Democratic primary, if not now, which we brought up a few times on the show already, went around to each candidate in the Democratic primary, and there were 20 of them, 30 of them at one point. But they went to the main ones, and they demanded for them to renounce the occupation. They demanded them to basically spout these anti-Israel talking points on camera. Very few of them didn't take the bait. To his credit, Cory Booker didn't take the bait.
Right.
But Elizabeth Warren is one of two senators, her and Bernie Sanders, who voted against keeping the embassy in Jerusalem. This vote was a few weeks ago. There were only two senators who voted against it. Imagine. It's changing the status quo. That was the biggest issue with moving the embassy to Jerusalem, was the change of the status quo. Now it's the status quo, and they want to change it back. And it is absolutely ridiculous. So Elizabeth Warren, who has an If Not Now co-founder as her foreign policy advisor when she was running her campaign, but she's still a prominent member of the Democratic Party. Biden, I called him Biden for a second, but he acquiesced the fact that that West Bank and Gaza, or Judea and Samaria and Gaza, are under occupation. Gaza, there is no occupation in Gaza, and the West Bank, the Judea and Samaria, to call it an occupation is a incredible misdirect in terms. It is security for the state of Israel to prevent another intifada, and it has been incredibly successful, and it only exists because of the history, the shared history between the Palestinian people and the Israeli people. And if that history wasn't so bloody, then we wouldn't need to take so many precautions. We wouldn't need to have a wall. We wouldn't need to have checkpoints. There wouldn't need to be any of these things. But the history is incredibly bloody. And let me tell you, fool me once, shame on me. Fool me twice, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Israel has been fooled many times, and that's one of the reasons why, despite the fact that they can't get it together on elections, 70-80% of the Israeli Knesset is on the same page when it comes to defending its citizens. And that's why if Netanyahu wasn't such a politically charged figure, they would be having an 80-seat coalition right now. But that's a completely different story.
Yeah, no, 100%. 100% there, because your rank and file Israeli Jew, they're to the right, and it's, I don't even like these terms, left wing, right wing, but I guess when it comes to our claim to Israel and what to fight for, then I guess 80% of Jews in Israel, that's what they think. It's ours. No apologies. Literally, no apologies at all.
I think the days of Ehud Olmert and Ehud Barak offering 97% of Judea and Samaria to the Palestinian Authority, or the PLO, those days are over. All right, it was offered in the early 2000s to Yasser Arafat, and he launched his second intifada. It was offered in the mid 2000s to Mahmoud Abbas, and he walked away from the table without a counteroffer. Donald Trump, President Trump, brought up a peace deal. He tried to get the Palestinian people to come in and join. They said, no, we will not sit down with them. And he put together something anyway. Now, it was dead on arrival, but it was dead on arrival because the Palestinian people do not want peace. They do not want their own state. They have had the chance to have their own state for the entirety of the last century. They decided not to do it. And they want to be refugees, and their political class wants them to stay as refugees, stay as poor, and so they could blame Israel. By the way, what I was saying before was when you were talking about Jordan and 1948 to 1967, In 1949, Jordan annexed Judea and Samaria, the West Bank. It was Jordanian territory. They did not assimilate the people over there. They did not make them full citizens. They didn't give them housing or anything like that. In that same period of time, Israel, a much smaller country than Jordan, with a lot less resources at the time, assimilated and integrated millions of Jews from around the world who were kicked out of their homelands, or they were refugees from the Holocaust or from the Middle East or from Russia or from all over the place, into Israeli society. So what happened between 1949 and 1967 to the quote unquote Palestinian people? They were kept as refugees, as political props against the Israelis. There was no reverting back to pre-1967 lines and saying there will be peace. It doesn't exist. That's a fantasy, and it will never happen because nobody wants it to happen. They want to destroy Israel. That is it.
Well, here's the choice. Mahmoud Abbas, who has the pay for slave program, he'll pay terrorists to kill Jews. It's one choice. And the most popular movement in Judea and Samaria, the West Bank, is Hamas, according to all reports. And therefore, the choice there will be tunnels and missiles, et cetera, et cetera. So Gaza will be effectively in that area. Can you have a functioning airport under those conditions? Can you have an economy under those conditions? Can you have a normal life? And no, absolutely no. And you can't have it under Mahmoud Abbas too, because if he was empowered to have his own independent state, then obviously the paper slave program would be more widespread than it is. They make it clear what they believe. They don't believe we have a right to a Jewish state. So Israel has to hold firm. And they're showing their true colors in supporting this intifada. What will happen? What will emerge? Well, there certainly is a feeling in Israel that more and more that what Rabbi Kahana and some others were talking about was not far off.
Absolutely. And also, speaking of the pay for slave program, it was made illegal in the United States to send funds to the Palestinian Authority as long as they continued their pay for slave program. It was called the Taylor Force Act. And so some are saying that that when President Biden, started refunding the Palestinian Authority, he was violating U.S. law.
Right.
I'm not sure if there's any lawyers or anyone who's actually suing the Biden administration over this, but it's just something we have to keep in mind.
No, 100%, 100%. So there's been demonstrations in, certainly downtown New York, Manhattan, vicious and violent, anti-Semitic, anti-Israel protests and that. What have you heard from the community in New York?
So the community in New York is very scared, but unfortunately they've been used to it for the past year. They've had violence from really the brothers in arms of the Black Lives Matter movement.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of violence, and the Black Lives Matter movement actually just came out in solidarity with Hamas. They refer to them as, they came out in solidarity with the Palestinian people, #Free Palestine, but we know who they're talking about. They know who they're talking about. They're talking about Hamas. They're talking about a terrorist organization that seeks to destroy every single Jewish life, not just in Israel, but around the world. They want to have a second Holocaust. So that is what Hamas's goal is. And the Black Lives Matter movement, which many Jews marched with last year, many shuls, Orthodox shuls, pro-Israel shuls, they marched with the Black Lives Matter movement last summer to protest the killing of George Floyd. And that is something that has been going on in this country for a year now. And it is the same people out in the streets who are doing the same thing, going hand in hand. And it's unfortunate for anyone who lives in any city in the country should really be thinking about getting out of it, because the cities are, honestly, in America, are not safe anymore. I have family and friends who live in New York City. I tell them they got to move. They got to get out.
Right.
And the commute will be longer to your offices, but you'll be safer. And I don't know. I used to make a joke that I would have a harder time walking around in a MAGA hat in New York City than in a yarmulke, because America is not an anti-Semitic place. New York City is not an anti-Semitic place. But at this point, I don't know. Maybe it's a coin toss of what will get me harassed first.
Well, you know what? During the as the coronavirus was starting, and Jewish communities were noticing that Israel is on the, just so advanced. And I mean, they are. The economy has opened up, and they're so advanced. Everybody's vaccinated. Just about everybody in Israel is vaccinated, and everything's open except for there's terrorist attacks right now going on. But everything is open, and people are happy with the direction things are going in Israel. So there's been an upsurge, according to the Jewish Agency of Jewish Communities in Diaspora, Jews, saying that they express serious interest in moving to Israel, making Aliyah, and bringing their businesses there, everything. So now that we're witnessing this spike in anti-Semitism, there's a silver lining too, that we have a state of Israel that, on the one hand, as the coronavirus was in full gear, that Jews are thinking, I want to pack it in. I want to go to Israel. I want to contribute to Israel. I want to raise my family in Israel, or start a family in Israel, start a life in Israel, a real blessing. But also you got this mix now of the anti-Semitism, and Jews are saying in greater numbers now, that's the place for the Jewish people to be. So, we had Meir Jolowitz on the show. He was a former chairman of JDL a number of years ago. I knew him in the 80s. He lives in Arizona now. He was in Israel, so maybe he'll go back. But and he said something that was really very important. And he said, just remember, one day in Auschwitz, during the height of the Holocaust, 12,000 Jews murdered. And in all the wars in Israel, what's the number? It almost equals that in all the wars of what we lost. So, and all the terrorism and everything. It's unbelievable. So, as the Free Palestine, in quote, movement goes around the globe, intimidating Jews, targeting Jews with their venom and with their hate and with their false accusations of Islamophobia, Jews are racist or whatever. A lot of Jews are thinking, I'm packing in, I'm moving to Israel, or I'm going to go back and forth, commute back and forth. I'm going to be inventive in how I'm going to support Israel. I could have a business. And, today with coronavirus, there is also the blessing of, it's interesting to even use the word blessing, but in the context that, everybody's doing things online now. And there are a lot of people with businesses, they're thinking, well, I don't have to have face-to-face meetings, meeting people physically all the time. I could do a lot of these meetings and transactions through the internet. So I could be in Israel, I could locate there, and I could spend whatever percentage of time running my business in such a manner. And if I have to be there, if you're a lawyer, I have to be in Manhattan. I have to be in Dallas, Texas, or whatever. But, you're not in court every single day. So there's a lot of Jews that are thinking in terms of how to spend time in Israel and spend time outside and do their work through the computer. So it's going on.
And they absolutely should be thinking about that. I just remember a few years back, I went to visit Israel. I went for 3 days for a family wedding. And there is a palpable feeling of homecoming that I just don't have anywhere else when you walk around the streets of Yerushalayim. I can't say I haven't thought about it many times. I do have a strong connection with the state of Israel, but I also have a strong connection with America. I mean, I grew up here. I was raised here. I have a very strong feeling for America. I love this country. It has been an incredible friend to the Jewish people throughout its history. And America is really a wonderful, wonderful place for Jews. That is, regardless of who is president, that is regardless of how many fringe voices there are in the House of Representatives, because I know through talking to members of Congress during my lobbying trips, talking to their aides, talking to just seeing on social media. I know that the pro-Israel voices get drowned out by the few anti-Israel voices. But those anti-Israel voices are loud and they're very scary to hear. So I think we just have to keep fighting. Now, I started by saying that every generation has the enemies that are trying to kill it. Thankfully, our generation of enemies compared to previous generations are pussycats. They're nothing. So hopefully we will make our forefathers proud when we vanquish these enemies like they vanquish theirs.
Well, listen, we're blessed to live in this generation. You know, our parents, my father lost his family during the Holocaust, and my mother from Romania, they went through hell, the Romanian Iron Guard during the Holocaust and everything. And we're a privileged generation. We have the state of Israel, and we're watching a state of Israel that's thriving and on the cutting edge of technology and how to defend the Jewish people. And
for my generation, for my age, the biggest issue we have is how to pay for yeshiva tuition. Those are good problems to have. And
in Israel, it's covered.
Well,
it's covered.
That's true. I know. Don't think I don't know people who haven't moved there for that reason.
That's a good reason too.
It's a solid reason.
We have, I think, our doctor in the studio. We have a song to put on. Powerful.
Okay, we'll put on a little song here coming up, and then from that, you all want to say each get a closing comment before we go to the end title. So here's, I'm going to put on a quick little clip just so everybody understands what we're dealing with right before the song.
Okay.
The reason why we are here because we are Muslim. Innamal mu'minuna ikhwa. Those brothers in Palestine, they're our brothers. That's our blood. Our war is one. Our deen is one. Our Rasul is one. The solution, very simple. Jihad fi sabilillah. We have armies. We have tanks. We have soldiers. What are they waiting for? Oh yeah, this goes out to the Muslim armies. What are you waiting for? Jihad is responsibility on you. Wipe out that Zionist entity. How dare they? Occupy How dare they? How dare they? I have no honor in you. The Muslim youth here, we, the Muslims in the West, we are with you. We make dua for you. Make jihad fi sabilillah. Remove.
Lovely, isn't it? Now I'll put on a little song. Just had to end with it, so we don't forget why we're here.
Absolutely.
Sure.
Closing comments.
Well, I think.
Go ahead, Moise.
Yeah, I think that said it all. I mean, you start with just rabid anti-Semitism, and you end with a beautiful rendition of Hatikva, and it just goes to show that long after these enemies of ours, of the Jewish people and of the Jewish state, are gone and buried and in the dust, and their names are forgotten over the course of ages, we will still be here. We will still be around, and that has been true throughout the ages, and it will continue to be true.
Well, look, we talked about the anti-Semitism taking place at these anti-Israel rallies, lynch mobs, in fact, as well. I've never seen this intensity before, and it's going to increase. It's not helping society at all. There's no question about it, but it's very clear to the Jewish people what the message is. And Jews will continue to support Israel or move there and be part of Israel, of Israeli society. We're living at a great period of time. The state of Israel will finish the job that has to be done dealing with Hamas, whether it means, whatever form Hamas will still be around in Gaza. Israel will make it very clear. And Israel holds the upper hand. There's no question about it. And we're not going to march into the gas chambers again, period. Israel is strong. We have strong leaders in Israel. We've got a fabulous army. And but the bottom line is the Jews in Israel, they want to get on with life. They want to flourish and excel at everything. So they want to finish the job against the enemy, call out the enemy, and do what has to be done. So and we're going to continue to speak the truth, and we're never intimidated by the anti-Semitic freaks that are at these rallies. Thank you, everyone.
Closing comment from our sponsor, the concealed carry tallit bag, because nothing says never again like a Jew with a gun. Thank you, guys. We'll see you next week. For those paying attention, we'll be back next week, 7:30 Toronto time, 6:30 South Texas time. So figure out what time it is by you. And here's our closing song.